All right, well, let's talk about this little thing, which is the Infiray T2S Plus. This is a USB thermal camera. And as you can see on the lens housing there, it's a 256 by 192 pixel thermal sensor inside of this thing. It's got a manual focus adjust lens, and it's a macro lens, so this is really made to get very close. Specifically, they advertise a few features like this thing being good for PCB inspection, so it's not for long distance detection, it's more of like within a house or macro style shots. And so in this video, I will show some shots of a PCB around the house, looking for thermal leaks in the ceiling, looking at a freezer, just some basic stuff to try to identify, is this thing really worth it? You can see on the front, this thing has a really interesting kind of lens. That's because it's an IR camera, and so the lens has to be optically correct for infrared spectrum light, not normal visible light. So it is a little different. So let's look at the specs, and here I've got the brochure from Infiray, and so this is for the T2S Plus, and as we scroll down we see the world's first 8mm macro thermal camera for smartphones, and you can see it just plugs into the bottom of the phone. You download their app and it just works. I've been using this thing for a few days now, and it really does just work. It will measure up to 450 degrees Celsius, which is a little over 840 degrees Fahrenheit. And I have tested that, and it will just max out there. It won't read any higher. And so Infiray does make several different little thermal cameras, consumer-oriented cameras. They also make more professional-oriented cameras for security reasons. They also make several cameras targeted for hunting and outdoor use. This, as you can see, it's a 8mm macro lens, 256 by 192 pixel sensor with a 12 micrometer pitch. One of the interesting things about this thing is it has a 25 hertz refresh, which is about twice as fast as many other styles of low-end thermal cameras. So it actually offers a pretty decent frame rate, and I'm going to be able to show you video of that. Low power consumption, as you can see, it will measure negative 20 degrees Celsius up to 450 degrees Celsius. It's got apps for Android and iPhone. And it's got a lot of options that I'll demonstrate in this review, such as multiple color palettes and things like that. You can also show on screen. Here it says maximum, minimum, central point temperature displays. I'll show you how that looks. So first up, just a quick demonstration of what a thermal camera does. Here's my dog, and you can see he's been sitting on the couch. You can see areas around him where he's been laying because they are still warm from his body heat. And this is a rainbow color palette where, white is the hottest temperature and blue is going to be the coldest. Now, I will say that this camera adjusts the color palette on the fly for whatever is in frame. So regardless of how hot something actually is, the hottest thing in the frame will always be kind of white. If you're using this color palette. So all that to say, you can't judge actual temperature by the colors. They're all relative to whatever else is in the frame. It'll also pick up remnants of heat. So here's a couple footprints from where I've been walking. It is pretty sensitive, and it does give decent resolution. Again, it's not going to be as nice as the high-end stuff with 512 or higher pixel count, but given that those usually cost over $1,000 up to multiple thousands of dollars, this one is a pretty good deal because I only paid about $350 for this. So next up, we're going to have a demonstration of the higher temperature range. So here's a video of the induction annealer I have, and right now it's maxing out at 283 degrees on the brass, but you'll see once I flip over to the high range, it will immediately peg this thing out at 824 degrees because that's as high as it will read. And that does appear to be a hard cap within the software. Even though this brass is probably getting up closer to 1,000, it just won't read that high. But this is one of the more useful functions of this thing, is that you can look at things while they're operating and spot, you know, are things getting overheated, or are there problematic elements? And right here, I've actually spotted a component on this PCB that is over temperature. And so I will be able to correct that problem by replacing that resistor with one that is better specified. Here's the result. Whenever I actually got in there and looked, you can see that one of these resistors has absolutely cooked itself because it's been getting up to, you know, 400 plus degrees, and the one right above it is fine because it's not overheating. And so already, you know, this is one of the useful functions of this, is that it spotted that resistor, which I had no idea was overheating to this extent. And so now I'll be able to replace that with a suitable resistor so that hopefully it will be able to dissipate enough power so that it won't be overheating nearly that bad. So here's a demonstration of my deep freeze, and you can see there's plenty of resolution. You can even see the inner coil. That is saying it's really only 84 degrees Fahrenheit, which is, you know, it's not warm at all. I mean, it's much cooler than I am, but whenever I put my hand to it, I can actually feel, yeah, it is a little warm there. Now, for context, the rest of the room, you can see where in the ceiling there's some poor insulation, there's the AC vent, there's the AC intake, and you can see right around it where they've cut into the ceiling, there's a little leakage, right? So the vent is 5 or 6 degrees Fahrenheit cooler. And again, you can see where this area of my house doesn't have great insulation in the ceiling. You can actually even, there's a ceiling fan in the way, but if you look carefully, you can even spot where some of the rafters are. And again, so maybe I need to get up there and do a little bit better insulating this area of my house. But back to the deep freeze, you can see it's kind of cool around the lip. So there is a little, you know, if there's any of the energy being wasted, it's, you know, that seal, it's where it comes together. Open it up, and very, very, very cold. Now, I also do want to say this thing, there's different emissivity settings, obviously, so, you know, you can't 100% rely on the temperature as far as being super accurate, but, you know, it's pretty close. You know, my AC is set to 72 degrees, you know, and based on the wall temperatures, I'd say that that's within 5 degrees of the actual temperature of, you know, whatever these things are. So I'm going to go into the kitchen, and so here's the refrigerator. Again, you can see some heat down around the bottom. It's a stainless refrigerator, so you can actually see heat reflection, and there's my pantry door also doing a little reflecting of the infrared, so, you know, kind of interesting. All right, so in opening the doors, you'll see pretty quickly, you know, it looks very, very cold, but this thing auto-adjusts its sensitivity so that, you know, whenever you're looking at something, it always kind of scales the color range. And so when I open the freezer, you'll see all of a sudden the fridge looks like it's glowing hot, but really it's just adjusting the color scale based on what's on the screen. And it always kind of makes the hottest thing, you know, hot. You really do have to pay attention to what the readout says. I'm going to flip over because there are actually different color systems. So this is called rainbow. You can do black hot. You can do white hot, iron rainbow. I think this is a high contrast setting, iron gray. So there's, you know, there's a lot of different settings that you can choose. I've found that the rainbow and white hot kind of seem to be the easiest. The black hot's okay too, but I actually think white hot and rainbow actually allow you to see the most. So there's back to rainbow. Again, if I open this, and then if I go to white hot, I feel like white hot is almost just like a black and white picture. And it is pretty easy to actually see what's what's happening. Rainbow's not bad either. Okay, so let me show you one last area where this thing can be useful. So this, if I can get this thing focused in, this is the ceiling in my master bathroom. And again, you can spot where, there might be some areas where I want to come back and look at the insulation above my ceiling. I think I said earlier you could see the rafters. Those aren't rafters, those are ceiling joists. But yeah, I've certainly got some stuff in the ceiling, right? You can actually see where there's some areas where I don't have great insulation, and maybe I want to come back and check that out. Now, there's only so much you can do about that kind of thing because, again, that seems to be a joist that's a little warmer, and you can't really do anything about that. But you can go through your house and spot where there are thermal leaks. Yeah, so here we are in my, this is my workout room. It's a former garage that got enclosed in, and you can see on the ceiling some real hot spots toward the edge of the house. And so, again, this is useful. All right, so one of the use cases for a thermal camera is for electronics, and you can see this thing doesn't appear to be in focus. Now there's two problems. One is that this camera is manual focus. You do have to focus it yourself. The other thing is that what we are looking at is a circuit board. This is a STM32 Nucleo board. And it's a very uniform temperature. You can see as soon as I touch the edges, it warms up. And so when things are pretty uniform in temperature, it can be really hard to pull focus and see much difference in them. Now, let me really quick, I'm going to plug this thing in and you'll immediately see. So by the way, this is not actual heat. This is thermal reflection off of the traces and leads and tinned leads on little ICs and the pads and things. So that's just reflection off of those. That's not actually anything that's hot. You do have to be aware that that is a thing, right? Infrared is still basically a form of light, and so it will reflect off of some surfaces. But you can see where I touch this thing, it does get warm. Now, it's got a couple of USB connectors, so I'm going to plug those in and we'll see what heats up on the board, because that is one of the things that you can do, is do PCB inspection and parts inspection to see, hey, is anything getting really hot, hotter than it should? So let me plug this in. All right, so immediately, and now I can start to get this thing in better focus, we get a hot spot. Now, it's not very hot. Again, that's probably within 5 degrees of the true temperature, so it's maybe 90 degrees Fahrenheit. That's not very hot. That is the main microcontroller on this board that's glowing. Now, some other things are starting to get warm. There's some power resistors that are starting to warm up. There's probably a transistor. Let's see, what is that over here that's getting warm? I think that may be a voltage regulator or something that's getting a little warm there. But again, it's relatively speaking, it's not really that hot. Anything else? Let's see, is that just a reflection or is that actually something getting warm here? I think this is going to be, let's see if I can actually find it here. That's just a LED that's on. Actually it's red, so that's probably, it's got a little light that bleeds over infrared spectrum. Else getting that warm on this side of the board. If we flip it over, you'll see one glowing little, again, either a voltage regulator or something right there that's pretty warm. Now, it's not crazy. Again, you're looking at 90 degrees there. So that's, just a quick look at what you can do. Now, the other thing is this is, again, a manual focus camera. It will actually pull almost, well, really a macro focus. So you can see if I put my finger in here, it kind of rescales the image. Some of the little tiny components, you can actually get extremely tight focus pulled. So I am, again, right up on top of these components. Let me see if I can get this focused. There we go. So you can see kind of the level of detail. You can even see the traces reflecting under the solder mask on this thing, right? I mean, these are, again, I am extremely close to this board. So you can get extremely good detail if you're inspecting a PCB. Again, you know, what you're seeing right here, these little red round spots down at the bottom, that's actually the end of the pins reflecting, right? That's how tight you can get on this thing. So again, as I zoom in, you can see the foot pads. Those are tiny little resistors. Again, just super small. Those resistors just being just a little bit warmer than everything around them. And if I flip this thing over again, and as we zoom in, again, here is the main microcontroller. Let me get the focus correct. Right, there you go. Right, you can see the teeny tiny little resistors all around this thing. You know, I know that looking at this image, it is difficult to get an appreciation for the level of detail. But as I get really close to these feet, you know, you will see the size of the components and how close you are able to get. You know, because again, this thing's taking up the full screen. Let me pull out and get this thing focused again. Again, that's what you're looking at, and it may be hard to tell, but here's my finger, right? I mean, that thing is absolutely tiny. This is a USB connector over here. Again, as I pull the focus, you will see just how small the components, and you can see the traces and how close you can get. So that's one of the strong points, I think, is for something like, you know, PCB inspection. You can actually use this thing, and now you can start to see how, you know, heat from the microcontroller is kind of soaking a little bit of the board, but you do have to keep in mind, again, the temperature range is really not that large here. So next to it, and again, they are so kind of uniform, you can't even tell that they're there until I get some reflection. A couple other boards. And so what I'll show you is how you can use this to identify some problems. So these are both Arduino Uno boards. This is a third party. This is an actual Arduino Uno. Let me unplug the STM board. 130 degrees. Now here is the regular Arduino board. It's a Uno. You can actually, even in the reflection, see the Arduino symbol right there on the thing right there. I believe that's the USB controller, something that actually gets pretty warm. But again, it's 89 degrees. It's not actually that hot. There is a little resistor, capacitor, something there that's getting kind of warm. But overall, you know, it's really, you know, this thing stays very cool. Doesn't really get that hot. If I flip it over, it's actually got a little case on it. So let me pull that case off. Flip it over, not really much going on. Again, nothing really warm. The warmest thing is that USB controller. Now, the third-party board is broken. I think I shorted a pin or did something where I busted something inside the controller on this board. So the microcontroller chip, it just has a fault, right? And it's something is in there, it's just shorted out. And so you can immediately see, yeah, there's a problem with this thing, you know, that it's not supposed to be, you know, 260 degrees. And by the way, I have touched that. Before I got this camera, I didn't know what was wrong with this. I knew that it wouldn't boot. I picked it up. I actually touched that thing right after I think I still had it plugged in. Yeah, it really is. That is not lying. It is that hot. And so that's one of the advantages, you know, of this thermal camera is, well, instead of touching stuff, you can actually look at it and spot. If you've got an electrical fault and something's getting really hot, well, you can actually just spot it. So to sum up, yeah, I think this is a really great device. It's really tiny. It's, you know, less than an inch cubed. You can just pop it into your pocket and go. It offers really good resolution and sensitivity. You know, it's phenomenally useful for you know, looking at different thermal leaks and, you know, areas around your house or inspection of PCBs. You know, you just, there's a lot of things that you can do with this. Now, I do think it depends, like, do you have a use that warrants the $350 cost that I paid? And you know, that isn't a cheap device, but for the capabilities that it offers, you know, with the resolution, with the 25 hertz refresh rate, it's supremely competitive in this space, and you're not going to get a lot better anywhere near this price point. Now, it does have a couple downsides. I don't really care for the male USB plug. I wish that was female, because most USB cables kind of, you know, already offer a male end. But I do understand that, you know, that's so that it can plug right into a phone without any other modification. It is manual focus, which, you know, for better or worse, that's just what it is. If it were autofocus, it would have to be bigger, and so, you know, that's just one of the constraints. It does keep the price down. It does keep the size down. The biggest flaw with this device is the software, the app. For the most part, the app works great. However, when taking a photo, there's a ton of lag, and it often doesn't seem to register. And so you may not see your photos show up on the phone until literally minutes later. And I don't know what's going on there, but I've taken photos, they don't show up, then I unplug the thermal camera, and later the photos are there. A bigger problem is with the video. The video output, it doesn't really match the audio sometimes. There are missing pieces where the video doesn't seem to start when you push the button. And so you'll think you're recording something, and then later when you look at the video, it's not there. It also records at 25 frames a second, which doesn't really fit to standard 30 or 60 FPS timelines whenever you're doing video editing. I didn't really understand that that was a big problem until I started working on this video. But I will say overall, those are pretty minor downsides. Again, this thing, it works really well. And for the money, I think it would be very hard to beat. Now, you know, obviously my opinion is based solely on the use of this device. I paid my own money for it, but I also have no experience at all with any other thermal optic. So, you know, take it for what it's worth. In my opinion, this has been a pretty good purchase. If you can justify the, you know, expense, which is not small, I do think it represents a heck of a value. So from there, you know, if you've got any questions or have any comments, just leave them down below in the discussion, and I'll get back to you when I can. Thanks.